the discussion forum is there. And then we've got lists of other things that we thought would be useful for the students. So there's a list to a load of resources that are available through our library. Study skills for people who have not been in the university for a while, or if ever. We set up a Facebook page for them, although they tended not to use that. Whether they had their own Facebook pages that we didn't know about, I'm not sure. And then again, wouldn't really be relevant to what we're going to be doing with CPD. There's all the grades and the assessments coming out at the end of that. We put the modules in, and Blackboard was very useful. I imagine other systems are the same, that they can set a timed release. So we set everything up, and then it would release one module per week. We normally released in the early hours of the Saturday morning. And then if you click on these, you go in and you'll see what's within each of the particular modules. Each of the modules is based around a particular theme. And then we had the Unit 0 at the beginning, which introduced what we were going to do, how our concept of distance learning worked. They could make sure they could access Blackboard, make sure they could access the library, all of that sort of thing in the first week before the actual learning starts. So this is the typical start of one of the modules. We give them a study guide at first, and they can either access it online or they could download it as a PDF. And then we have lectures either by our own staff or by external staff on the various topics within that week. And normally we'd have a couple of lectures and then 2 or 3 pieces of reading material around each of those per week. Within the study guide, we gave them a checklist. And again, they could do this as a printed version, or they could just check it off online. So what they've got to do in order, and they can just work through, make sure they've done everything that they are supposed to be doing or were supposed to be doing. This was a sort of example of the lectures that we were giving. These are our own lectures. We had a range of different things that we tried, particularly at the beginning. Initially, we tried filming ourselves lecturing into a sort of dummy classroom, which wasn't successful. The problem with that was that we couldn't really show the figures and what I was looking at on the board at the same time as filming me. So in the end, what we settled for was to record it at our desks, and we would record the sound within PowerPoint. And then again, as I said, you'd record that as an MPEG file. So you've got the recorded video that then can be uploaded into Vimeo or to YouTube and so on. And we also obviously provided a PDF of all the slides as well. What we didn't allow them to do was to download the presentations in most cases, simply for the copyright reasons. There were a couple of exceptions that I'll talk about later on with that. We wanted, with the assessment, we wanted to make that consistent. We gave them one intermediate and one final assessment, and then there was continuous assessment as well with a discussion forum every week. The intermediate assessment was generally a literature review or an online webinar or a calculation exercise, and then we gave them an essay at the end to bring everything together. The way that the forum worked was that we would ask them a question based upon that particular week's material, which we wanted them to discuss amongst themselves. The idea of that was to keep them feeling part of the group. We marked it on the quality and the number of responses, how well they interacted with the other people and so on. We monitored them, we kept an eye on it while it was going on, but we wouldn't intervene unless it was absolutely necessary. We did try some non-assessed forums, again, right at the very beginning, but we found that they weren't taking part in those. So we had to give them an incentive, and the incentive was that was going to be part of what they were going to get their final mark. And the assessment came up for 10% of the mark for the module in the end. So these are the assessment pages, if you like. We gave them a test to make sure they could submit, first of all, successfully before that actually became crucial. And then you've got a folder for the forum. Here, in this case, the literature review and the final assessment. And we also gave them guidelines. very important for the written work, so they would avoid plagiarism. We also provided a quick, I think it was a 5 or a 10-minute video about what plagiarism was, which they had to look at in the first week as well. So all the material for their assessments was there in that particular folder. And with the discussion forums then, we'd give them the various topics. We'd again release a forum every week. And as tutors, you could see how many new posts there were, how many had been answered, how many new threads there were within that sort of thing. We found that it worked fairly well, but as you'll see later, some of them thought it was a bit of a Marmite sort of thing. This is the sort of discussion that we were getting. We tried to limit them to a maximum of 150 or 200 words per post. We were very much more interested in getting little and often, rather than a large number of posts coming through. And we got some really good discussions going for some of the topics that we were looking at there. So in the end, how successful were we? Well, we gave them an end of module evaluation. And what we found was that the students loved the flexibility that we were giving them. They liked the online material. They were very happy not to be sent masses of paper, which was the old way of doing distance learning. And they particularly appreciated the expertise that we brought in there. So the people who were giving TED Talks, the conference presentations from some of these world-leading people and so on. What weren't they happy with? The forum was a bit of a mixed bag. We were never really satisfied with how to mark it. We were constantly trying to tweak that to make it more effective. We found that the older students particularly didn't take to the forums at all. They just found it alien to their way of thinking, if you like. Younger students, we found generally were very, very happy with it. Some of the students wanted to download the material, as I've already mentioned, but we couldn't let them do that generally because of for copyright reasons, although we did make a few exceptions, which obviously I'm not going to go into here. We found that it was absolutely essential that there was high quality video and high quality sound. The figures that we used in particularly needed to be clearly legible. And it took us a couple of years to get that right. As I mentioned, it was much better, we found, to be recording at a desk rather than filming a lecture to a class or a ghost class. Although the technology is now moving on for that. The university used a system called Panopto, and when we were doing that initially, it was fairly primitive. Now I think it's much better, and they can get a much better quality of lecture capture than we were able to at the time. So the technology for all that is better. So basically, that's what we were doing. I don't know how we're doing for time. I might just try to log into this now, just so you can have a run through.
You got a couple of minutes, Phil.
Okay, that's good. So if we've got any questions, then maybe I could log into them through Blackboard and we could see how they work that way, or people could ask me what they, and I'll do my best to answer them here. But I'll just see whether or not Blackboard is going to show on this as well. If the video didn't.
Yeah, I think you need to share your whole screen when you go in the sharing options. Beth, do you want to?
Can you see this now? Or not?
Yeah, it's not loading.
It's not loading?
No.
No. Okay, we'll pass on that one then. But if we got it, has anybody got any questions for me?
We've had a few questions come through. They're not specifically to you, Phil, but shall I run through them? A lot of them are around the platforms available, particularly to non-university based groups, because presumably Blackboard is an academic-based platform. Ones that are obviously cheap and easy to access in a developing country. We've had a suggestion that Slack might be able to fulfil that need. And then there was also a comment around materials potentially needing to be downloadable due to unstable internet connections, and some thinking and advice around copyright on that would be useful. And then finally, how distance learning could work on phones rather than PCs if people haven't got access to the internet that way.
Right. Okay. Well, so far as the first one is concerned, about the various resources, I know we're going to be mentioning that later. So I won't say anything about those now, but Slack certainly has come up, and there are things like Moodle as well. Regarding the use on phones and so on, well, certainly Blackboard and I think Moodle both have mobile apps. So there is no reason why they can't be used on phones as well as on PCs. In terms of downloading material, it depends what you've got there in the first place, I think. There's huge amounts of open access material now. There are video resources. And if you're creating your own material, then there is no problem with sharing that with anybody and then downloading that. I think the problem that we had with a course at master's level, and again, that would be the same probably at undergraduate, is that we had a lot of links into scientific papers and so on, which are behind paywalls. And the university has a license to access these, but we can't share it outside the university. Increasingly now, though, scientific journals even are open access, so they will be available. And within those, obviously, the figures and the photographs and so on should be available fairly freely online. Was there anything else then, or am I covered?
There was one final thing about what's the composition of your students? Are they mostly local or international?
Right. The project was set up initially very, very focused on the UK. But we thought that if we were going to make it sustainable beyond the duration of the funding from the BBSRC, we had to start attracting overseas students as well. So we started broadening it out. And that's why we brought in modules like global food security, like climate change, like more global agriculture and environment modules within, and adding a little bit of international content into some of the other modules as well. So by the end, I say I've been out now for just over a year, but by the end, we still had the majority of students being UK based, but we were getting increasing numbers of overseas students. And I think they've changed the degree a little bit now, where it is focused as well on agroforestry, which has always been an overseas base. So I'm assuming that by now they have many more overseas students than we did when I was running the thing.
Okay, lovely. A couple have come in whilst you're talking, if that's all right, Phil.
Yeah, sure.
What have your students gone on to do with their education after completing their courses? Do you keep in contact? And what is the ratio of teachers to students? Was there any limitation?
Right. So far as their careers, again, we were very focused on people who were already working. These are people who wanted to get on. They wanted CPD maybe for a promotion, or their managers wanted them to get an upgrade in what the latest research was and so on. So most of them continued in their particular jobs, but we were aware of a number who got promotions fairly soon after getting the qualification, generally the ones who got through to get at least a PG certificate or a diploma. In terms of student to staff ratio, we were looking normally at round about maximum of 20 students per module. The constraint is not so much producing the material, obviously, but as in the assessment and the marking and so on. And the more complex and involved that is, then the fewer students you can get through in the time that you've got available. Theoretically, I suppose if you're not doing assessments, or certainly assessments in terms of credits towards masters or degrees or whatever, then there's no real limit at all to how many students you could have. Although the discussion forums might get a little bit unwieldy, I suppose, but then you could always break them into groups and so on.
Sorry, I think we're going to have to move on due to time limitations.
Okay.
There is another question there about the cost of the courses, but maybe we could.
Well, the courses, our fees were imposed by the university. I think now that I'm out, I can safely say that I didn't agree with the level of fee that we were charging, but a lot of them were sponsored by their employer.
Yeah. Great. Thank you very much for that really interesting presentation, Phil. I'm going to move on and introduce Dr. Mary Longworth and Dr. Sue Osborne from the School of Healthcare Sciences at Bangor University. And they're also in the Betsy Cooting Partnership. They've been working with the Sexual and Maternal Health Coordinator in Cooting District in Lesotho to co-design a distance learning package for fetal monitoring. So over to you, Mary, if you want to share anything.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. And Sue is, I think, having problems with the audio, so it might just be me talking. I don't know, Sue, can you talk? No. Okay. So I'm going to give an outline, really, of the project which we're involved with the Betsy Cooting Health Partnership. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Okay, I'm not sure if this is going to be right now. Yeah, right. Okay, can you see this? Can you see the full screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. So first of all, so I'm a midwifery lecturer, but I'm also a midwife who works in BCU. So when and Sue is also a midwife in BCU. So when we went over to Cooting, and our involvement in this project was as a midwife rather than actually as a midwifery lecturer. I had to divide my role there. So so I'm going to give you a little bit of background first. I'm a member of the Betsy Cooting Health Partnership, which is a district-to-district level partnership between Betsy Cadwaladr University Health Board and the Cooting District Health Team. So we're committed to responding to the self-identified needs of health colleagues in Cooting by working with our partners to provide whatever support we can within the financial and skills capacity of the group. So, very brief history of our partnership with Cooting District in Lesotho. So we're small, a very small group, but we are ever evolving HealthLink, and have worked for a number of years very closely with our partners on several projects within the health district in Lesotho. So we've been in partnership with them since 2008, and we've had various projects, and some of those projects have included maternal health projects. So this was the third project that I was involved with within this group. So from 2019 to 2020, our work has focused on supporting nurse midwives in Cooting with reducing stillbirths, neonatal deaths in Cooting through surveillance training supported by the Wales for Africa grant scheme. So this training package was initiated after we received feedback from colleagues in Cooting during and after training visits over the last few years. This included feedback from midwives from Cooting, data from the District Health Information System, meetings with the Pretoria University doctors who are the technical advisors on the quality improvement for Lesotho Ministry of Health, and also meetings with members of the District Health Management Team. The data that we found showed that Cooting had over 1,700 live births per year at its health facilities, and in 17-18 there were 28 neonatal deaths. 17 occurred in hospital and 8 at the clinics, and there were 23 stillbirths. So this was a very high rate in comparison to some of the other parts of Lesotho, and certainly it was the highest in Lesotho. So the quality improvement team at the Ministry of Health suggested that the majority of neonatal deaths could have been prevented. They were fresh stillbirths, which would have occurred during labour. And and they could be prevented if women could reach a health facility more quickly, or were better monitored during labour. So that was a part of our project, was to educate. It was a training package around better equipping midwives in recognising abnormal fetal heart rates. So our aim was to develop a fetal surveillance distance learning package. So the aim was to do this with our colleagues and with our partners in Kuting. So the aim of the project was co-design and pilot a short programme of learning for nurse midwives on how to monitor the fetus during labour, and then this programme make it suitable for distance learning. And it was also to support the knowledge and skills sharing between the health institutions in Wales and Africa for mutual learning and benefit. So firstly, we worked with the Sexual and Maternal Health Coordinator, Rebecca Watanier, and the Labour Ward Lead Midwife, Linyo Maboso, and when they came over to Bangor at the end of last year. And when they came over, we started to co-design a teaching programme based on what they wanted in this distance learning package for fetal monitoring in labour. And then Sue and I then went over to Kuting, having developed or partly developed a training package which we could then deliver to the midwives. At the same time, Rebecca and Dinny also wanted other aspects of training which were on breastfeeding and also the effective use of labour documentation, which we also did at the same time when we went out there. Now this was the bit that Sue was going to do. Sue?
Hi, Mary, can you hear me?
Oh, right, so you can. Right, I'm just going to change slides. Sue is now going to talk over the training that we did. I'm just going to swap presentation. Just bear with me, please.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? I hope.
Yes, I think, yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
no problem.
yeah.
So this is,
okay.
Sue's now going to talk about the training that we did when we went over to Kuting in January.
Okay. Hi. I'm Sue. So mainly we let the two lead midwives, Dinny and Rebecca, who had come over in November, to organise the venue and the teaching classes and transport for the midwives as well from the outer clinics. So basically the teaching that we did was split over 2 separate days, and we had a smaller group in each one, which did work out to our benefit. So at least we could give more attention to each midwife during that training. Main subject, was to teach the CTG interpretation, and we had borrowed a CTG from one of the hospital, Kuting Hospital, which Dinny had brought up with her, which was really good because what we did, we also borrowed a patient. She volunteered to come up, and the midwives had practiced putting the CTG onto the lady, and also we helped them read that monitoring as well, what we had applied onto the woman. So each one had a go, and we spoke through, and we let Dinny, she took over, and she was teaching them how to apply that CTG monitor onto them. So yeah, later on as well, the principles of the CTG interpretation, we could marry that up to the monitoring as well. Yeah, the days were mainly like group teaching, and the pre and post training questionnaire that Mary had devised as well. So there was a percentage of, let me see, the percentage of the pass rates beforehand was like 41.5%, and after the training, the post test results were at 64%. So I think that was quite a good response there from them. I think the main things that we came across, the hurdles that we'd come across really, was just a bit of time management, because it was bit difficult for them to come down from their clinics, as it took a good 2-3 hours for them to arrive. So classes were starting later and later, and obviously finishing later in the day. I think there's some taking about 3 hours to arrive to us. Yeah, so overall it was a good teaching session, and they had learnt a lot, and for the CCG interpretation. So if I hand you back to Mary.
Okay, thank you, Sue. So
Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, just go back to this. Okay, so so as Sue was just mentioned, yes. So I did pre and post test evaluations of their knowledge, and there was a significant difference between their response, their correct responses. I think that the challenges from having read their responses were that I realised that actually they practice quite differently, and they listen to the fetal heart rate at different times compared to the World Health Organization recommendations. And that in itself is a challenge, because, you know, one example is that we recommend that the fetal heart is auscultated every 30 minutes to every 60 minutes during labour. However, it seems from their feedback that they're only auscultating every 4 hours. And the challenge is that there are only there might only be one nurse midwife in a clinic out in one of the remote health centres who is not only looking after a labouring woman, but she's also having to run a clinic at the same time. So, you know, it's actually not possible for her in some circumstances to actually listen to the heart in accordance with the recommendations. And also, the other recommendation is that the fetal heart is auscultated more frequently if there is a fetal heart rate abnormality. And again, of course, that is, having read the evaluation of their responses, it seems that they're not able to do that. And that is as a result of limited opportunities for one-to-one midwifery care, particularly in the health centres. So that is a challenge. So since we left Cooting, because as you saw from the photos, both Dinny and Rebecca were facilitating these workshops with us. So they have also got those learning resources, which we did adapt over the week. We changed the presentation, we changed the worksheet in accordance with their feedback at the end of the week. So they have then been using those resources since we left in Cooting, and they've had some opportunities to have some classes with and training with the nurse midwives since we've left, and that has gone well according to them. But because of COVID, we were going to go back in October, and of course that we won't be going now. But in the meantime, we have been developing an online resource so that they can use that. So perhaps if we do go back next year, we can evaluate this resource. Originally, I wanted this training package to be a MOOC, which is stands for a massive open online course. But having been over in Cooting and having reflected on my experiences, I realised that they have limited internet connection, not so much in the hospital, but certainly out in the remote health centres. So I decided to develop an app, and or rather piggyback onto an existing app, which is what I'm doing at the moment. So there's an app which has been successfully used in Uganda for data collecting, which they are adapting for me so that I can put an algorithm, which we did use is in the training package. It's an algorithm for intermittent fetal heart rate monitoring, and they are adapting the app to be able to put this algorithm in so that midwives can look at this pathway and know what their action should be dependent on what, for example, the fetal heart rate is, and what further action they should take. So that is hopefully that will be developed by the end of the year, so that we can use it and pilot it in Cooting if we're fortunate enough to go back there next year.
Great. Okay.
Okay, I think I've finished. Yeah, so that's the algorithm. It's based on Maud et al. Looking at intelligent structured intermittent auscultation, which is a more structured way of picking up the fetal heart rate and picking up abnormality, rather than just listening to the rate itself. It's looking for other aspects of the fetal heart rate, such as acceleration, and listening to the fetal heart at different times. So that's what our algorithm is going to look like in this app.
Thank you very much. Can I just ask a question about, was that app already developed for specifically for fetal monitoring in midwifery or health monitoring?
It is health monitoring, but it's not for midwifery.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for this really interesting presentation. I'm going to hand over to Beth to summarise the questions. We've just got a couple of minutes, I'm afraid.
Okay, yeah, we've got a couple of questions. Firstly, did you come across any language barriers?
We did. They were familiar with some of the terms. Their English is very good, so and all their training is done in English, so that wasn't a barrier. But in terms of some of the terminology that I was using around fetal monitoring, they were not familiar with that. For example, terms like variability of the fetal heart rate, they didn't understand what variability meant. So I had to draw it to actually point out what I meant, to highlight what I meant. So yeah, there were, so in that respect there were.
Okay. And then secondly, in terms of follow-up, did you get feedback from the participants, and also do you know whether there was a decrease in stillbirths after the training?
We haven't evaluated the statistics locally in terms of stillbirth yet, but we are intending to. And we did evaluate the workshops after. So we did 2 workshops. We evaluated both of them, and they were, they were very good. The evaluations were very good, and they felt they'd learned a lot, and they wanted more.
Great. And then finally, there was a question around equipment and resources. Was that a consideration in terms of making sure the midwives actually have the resources to be able to put this training into practice?
Yes, we gave Rebecca and Dinia were given 2 laptops so that they could use those to bring up the worksheets and the presentations that we've given them, which the app will be based on. So we gave them those. So they didn't have those resources previously. So we did give them those, yes, prior to leaving.
Okay, thank you. And then there was just some clarity. People were asking that, so this training was done face-to-face, but obviously the plan going forward is to do it distance through the app, which is... Yes.
Yeah, so I think it's as a backup based on what we taught them. The intention is to, this was face-to-face, but moving forward it will be incorporated into an app.
Lovely. And would you be willing to share the details of the app that you piggybacked on, just so others can look at whether it might suit their needs?
Yes, I'll let them send me the algorithm, and I will be happy to share that.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you, Mary and Sue, very much for that really interesting presentation. It's great. Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on to introduce. Mary, could you just stop sharing? And I will, so Peter can start. I'm going to introduce Dr. Peter Harrington. So I'm really grateful to Dr. Harrington to joining us from County Wexford. Peter presented at the THET conference, COVID conference. I don't know if any of you were there, but Catherine mentioned that it was a really interesting model of looking at sort of reorientating a health partnership to look at COVID-19 preparedness. So it's from the Gori Malawi Health Partnership. So over to you, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Can you hear me, guys? You can. Yeah. Great. Okay. So thanks very much to Emma for the invitation to present. Give me 1 second. I need to get my slides going. Where are we? Yeah. Give me 1 sec, lads. I'm not. I'm going to go into. Where'd you? Yeah. Great. Okay. So, guys, I'm going to be a little bit hasty because I have a lot to say, too much to say as usual. So, my apologies. So, I'm a GP in Gorey County, Wexford, which is the part of Ireland that faces Wales. My practice partner, Joe Gallagher, and myself formed the Gorey Malawi Health Partnership in 2016. Our chief supporter has been Esther Ireland, and we have a link with St. John's Hospital, Mzuzu, which is now a formal Esther partner. And later you're going to hear from Roshi Nagudurua, who is an animator working under contract for Esther. So that's our symbol, and our partnership is varied members go back and forth to Malawi. On this occasion, we had a clinical pharmacist, a clinical scientist, and a nurse manager with an interest in quality assurance. So various groups go back and forth. Our epidemic that we were interested in particularly was the epidemic that raged before COVID-19 and still rages, which is non-communicable diseases, which is engulfing Africa for over 20 years, receives 1.8% of the aid budget despite its incredible expanding nature. And hopefully we'll get back to that at some point. So we work with, by mentoring. We have mostly through non-physician healthcare workers at St. John's Hospital, and by extension to 4 institutions in the same network. And we work with each institution to train key clinical workers and to provide locally appropriate clinical formularies. Now, to date, our only remote mentoring has been problem case analysis via Zoom, which of course is dependent on the internet on any given day. We've dipped our toe into animation briefly and Moodle briefly, but we have not quite penetrated those areas as yet. So with the arrival of COVID-19, I think I can safely say there's 2 things that apply to every partnership tuning in today. COVID-19 has changed your partnership substantially, and all support in the short term will have to be from a distance. So we all need to be gelling up in that area and improving in that nature. So once we recovered from our own shock here in Gorey, we decided we would reach out to our partners and ask them how we could help them with COVID-19, even though it wasn't our particular area. So we picked up the phone, we sent a WhatsApp, we had a WhatsApp telephone call, and we were delighted to make contact, and they were very delighted we made contact on this issue. So after discussion, we decided on 4 areas of response that would be a help to Mzuzu. First of all, we continued to give advice and be available for advice, and they're very welcome to hear their trusted friend from Ireland who had experienced COVID-19 tell them that this was something they needed to prepare for. We diverted some finance that was earmarked for other areas and sent it out for preparation. We sent out a resource package of aid containing useful pieces, face shields, face masks, pulse oximeters, and so on. And finally, at their suggestion, we decided to try and upgrade some remote educational supports, which we did from scratch and are still doing. So the problem our Malawi partners had was they seemed to have access to a lot of advice, but found it a little bit conflicting, a little bit cumbersome, and weren't exactly sure what they should believe and what they should focus on. So what I want to talk about for the remainder of this particular presentation, what Emma's asked me to focus on essentially is how we went from 0 to up speed in delivering educational resources remotely. So our idea essentially was of brief educational videos or podcasts that could be easily shared. And these are a 3 or 4 minute duration, featuring animation or graphics plus spoken word, using the English language initially, but with a view to possibly translating at other times into other languages, and disseminated by Facebook and WhatsApp. So Facebook apparently has the advantage of penetrating by adjusting the width band of the message, so that if it's going somewhere where it is poorly received, it can be, if it adjusts the width of its message, of density of its message, and also it allows us to track how far it's going. So these two advantages of a Facebook platform. But we envisage that Malawi will transmit it mostly through WhatsApp on smartphone. Now, as we're all aware, there are houses in Malawi that do not have running water and do not have electricity, but they have 3G, and 3G penetration is broad and rising. And most of our non-physician healthcare workers would have smartphones. So some sort of questions to ask before we started, and which you might like to ask if you're think of anything similar. Who is the audience that you want to meet, and how will you achieve penetration, and how will you measure success, or what would success look like for you? So unlike the earlier presenters, we are transmitting messages that may or may not produce change. As you'll see from the videos, they look quite simple, but in fact they're quite complex, and you need to know there's a lot of time involved, many man hours involved in getting these right. So I'm going to describe the process we used here to sort of create the podcast, and hand over to Roisin, who will talk a bit more about the actual animation. But before you decide what to send, you need to get your curriculum. You need to enlist contributors who will help you to devise curriculum. Once you have content, you do need to make sure that you have editorial input. We asked for editorial support from David Weekliam in the HSE Global Health Directive, and that gave us guarantee that what we were doing was in keeping with WHO advice. And in addition, we sent it out to our southern partners for just to be certain that the message was clear and that it was appropriate to the setting. At the end of that process, we produced a PowerPoint slides and a verbatim text which could be read by a narrator. At that point, we luckily got a phone call from David Weekly and said, you guys need to get some sponsorship for animation, and Esther Ireland came on board, as they've done so many times before for us, and paid for the project manager and animation. So at the end of the day, we had a partnership featuring our HSE, which is like the National Health Service in Ireland, Esther Ireland, and a number of general practitioners involved in projects in the developing world. So it's been a very, very broad church of people. So we have 14 podcasts, and today we're launching the first 7, and we would like the help of Hub Kimru to assist in the launching and dissemination of these. So we have 3 on institutional preparation, we have 2 on assessing possible COVID-19 patients clinically, and we have 2 each on hand washing and PPE. And there's further podcasts then covering special groups including pregnancy, HIV, persons living with albinism, the palliative patient, and finally 2 on the well-being of the healthcare worker and facts and myths in COVID-19. So these 7, the first 7 of these are available today, and we'll show you one of these in a moment. So I want to hand over to Roisin. I gather Roisin is lined up, and Roisin is the animator, and she's going to try and describe what it's like to receive a lot of messy information from Joe and myself and try and turn it into something that looks smart. Roisin, you're there somewhere.
Yeah. Thank
Great.
you, Peter.
Great. Good.
Okay.
Ooh.
So first of all, yeah, I'm just going to talk about kind of what on my side, like how it works and what you should have ready for if you would like to produce like videos or podcasts, and yeah, what you should have prepared in order to save time and energy. So for the first slide, I'm going to talk about just briefly what you need to have prepared. So sorry, can you move to the next slide, Peter? Thank you. So basically, as Peter has already mentioned, a verbatim was really helpful. Just to have all of the, all the points, all the dialogue ready and in PowerPoints was really helpful. Another really helpful thing is to have your audio files ready, and if you can't have your finished ready audio files, then even temporary audio recordings just on WhatsApp is really helpful, just to give the animator just a sense of timing in the video. and just it just saves time with like adjusting the video to audio in the long term. And then just also, as Peter's already mentioned, just consider, you know, what kind of you know, how many videos you'd like to produce, what is the target group, the content, everything. So on the next slide then, I'll be speaking about programs and software. So in general, programs you might see being used are Adobe software programs, so such as like Illustrator, Premiere Pro and After Effects, but these are quite advanced, and so I do use them a little bit for a few. In this project I've used them for a little bit, but these are more like advanced, and they're more complicated to use and would take a longer time. So for this particular project I was introduced to a program called Powtoon. Powtoon and iMovie are kind of more user-friendly programs, and they're a lot, you know, they're for more beginners, so even if you weren't a designer yourself, you could probably actually use them because they are so user-friendly, and they would save a lot of time because they have templates ready made and everything, and they're just really useful. I'd really recommend using Powtoon. So for your recording your audio, if you don't have, you know, actual recording equipment, just using WhatsApp to record is just really perfect. And just a few tips or advice on that is just to ensure that when you're recording, you record in a small space, you know, prefer maybe like a box room or an office, just to limit the kind of echo in the room. Speak just somewhere that you don't have any background noise, and try to keep still so there's no background noise. And also just you don't have to record on a whole episode in one take. You can do it in split in sections, just to ensure, you know, a clear recording, which can then be put together. So then next is just Audacity. It's an online audio editing software program, which is free, it's online, and it's really useful and user-friendly. So that's brilliant just for if you need to speed up or slow down or just edit the audio in any way. And then lastly, the Noun project was very helpful, just to have icons and different things that really assist when you're trying to make animations in a short time space. So on the next slide then, just timing. So it obviously basically one video that's maybe 3 to 5 minutes long could take anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks to make. And in general, the first video does really take the longest. Like animation is probably takes the longest, whereas if you have kind of but there's ways of speeding it up, like using more icons, and you know, software program like Powtoon really saves a lot of time. But just in general, the first video will always take the longest to produce, and the rest are a lot faster, and just once all the decisions are made. So, and yeah, just having the audio finished, ready to go, just sent to the animator is really helpful and will save a lot of time if you're under time pressure. So on the next slide then, just cost is basically the Adobe programs would require a monthly subscription. So they could be between, depending on what programs you're using, between 30 and 60 euro per month. Powtoon, there's a free online version, or else the pro version I think is like about 190 euro a year subscription. So definitely I'd kind of recommend using the pro version, because you have a lot more options to choose from. I think it is worth it. And then just Audacity is free online. It's a brilliant program. That's for the audio editing. And then designers and animators, basically in general, they would kind of work for maybe like a daily rate, and the cost of the programs would be included in that rate. But I think in general, a lot of designers will be happy to work for a cheaper price for a charity project or an NGO, as you know, it's just a nice project to work on. So yeah, that's all I think. So let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Roisin. Okay, so now I'm going to try and show you this video. If you bear with me for 1 sec, this is where we can go dangerously wrong. Okay, this is how the first video of the 14 and the first of 7 available today looks, and this is about preparing your institution for COVID-19. So let me know if you have trouble hearing this. Okay. Full screen. Here.
Sorry, Peter, I don't think the audio is on.
No.
I think you'll have to just stop sharing, and when you're sharing again, you might have to just
okay.
Yeah.
Preparing your institution for COVID-19. Part 1 of 3. COVID-19 patient flow. Target audience. Healthcare managers and senior clinical staff in lower and middle income countries. The aim of this video is to help managers.
That's great. We can hear it if you screen it. Yeah, we can hear it. That's great.
Good. Cool.
Yep.
Okay, guys, we'll go again. Apologies. We might have to start out. If you don't mind, just show up from the beginning very briefly. Okay.
Preparing your institution for COVID-19. Part 1 of 3. COVID-19 patient flow. Target audience. Healthcare managers and senior clinical staff in lower and middle income countries. The aim of this video is to help managers of healthcare institutions prepare their institution for the arrival and escalation of the COVID-19 epidemic. This short video focuses on how health facilities should prepare for the spread of the virus in Sub-Saharan Africa. It emphasizes WHO recommendations and is based on a document by Dr. Ydyn, Director of Ireland's Health Service Executive Global Health Program. Implementing a health service response to COVID-19 is part of a wider national, local, and population-based response.
A few are having trouble hearing.
Sorry,
So
Peter, maybe you could turn up the volume? Sorry.
Roisin, any chance I could briefly move on? You might see it up there. Is that possible?
Yeah, no problem at all. I can put it on mine when you're finished, or
I might move on to dissemination.
Sorry.
Yeah. Right.
So, Peter, are you going to carry on?
Yeah.
Roisin?
sorry, I will. I'll just share it on mine now. Sorry, guys. 1 second.
We might have to skip a bit through just for time. Sorry.
Yeah.
Considering temporary structures, hence, for example, within the hospital grounds was provided to the following this assessment, any patient may be
Sorry, I'll just be 1 second now.
Okay. What?
is it worth taking some questions whilst you load it up, Roisin?
That would be great.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
guys.
Yeah, no worries. So a couple of things have come in. People have asked, are you going to be able to make the podcast available to others because people would like to cooperate and not duplicate the work you've done? So that would be great if you're willing to share it more widely.
Sorry, Emma, could you repeat that for us?
Just people were asking if you're able to share the podcast and make them available for others because
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah.
thank you for that. I guess that hopefully Roisin will line this up better than I can. My apologies. But yes, in a nutshell, we have some links for the first 7, and we would appreciate if any of you are involved in anything to do with health in Sub-Saharan Africa, that you would send them out to your institutions and and disseminate on our behalf. It would be fantastic. So yes, I have a slide actually. I might just come on to that. Give me a moment here now to like scroll up. So, I'll tell you what. Give me 1 sec, guys. Yeah, click up here a bit more. Okay, so if you can see my screen there, these are the settings. Now, I'm not too sure, Emma, did I send these to you last night in my, no, I might not have, but I can share them. I can send them on to Beth now, or to Emma now might be the easiest thing by email, but if they could go up perhaps at the end of the conference, that'd be great.
Great, yeah, we can definitely send that out after
Yeah.
the webinar, thank you.
And then we've got a couple of questions around language and getting the audio from partners. In terms of, were there any language barriers, and how easy is it to change the language of the animation? And then also, how did you get audio from the partners and manage the co-production of that?
Okay, so basically I'm working with a woman, Hala. She's from Esther Island, Ireland, and she was really great for finding contacts. So she found a contact in Malawi, a doctor, and then through him he also gave like you know, a friend or two who can possibly do other videos. So it was just down to her. She found someone. But then changing it into different languages shouldn't be too bad. It's just adjusting the animation then to the new recording that you have, and then just finding someone who speaks the language and can translate the written text into that language. So it really shouldn't take too long once the backbone of your animation is ready and there.
Lovely. And managing the co-production with the person in Malawi, were there any technical difficulties with getting the audio?
So basically at the start, his name's Elias, and he had tried to take you know, a recording of just an entire episode in one take, and so unfortunately the first time it took him like 3 hours to get a 3-minute recording, and we just kind of told him like, oh my god, you don't have to do it in one go, you know, you can do it in split sections. So after that, so number one, he got a lot better as he went along, so the recordings definitely got better because he was just doing them in sections, and you know, doing a very clear few sentences and then pausing it next recording. So that was really helpful. And then I just used the program Audacity online, and that's really helpful for just putting all different parts together, and if you need any spaces in between, or you know, just adjusting it. So that wasn't bad at all, and I'd say I'd probably just do the same in Malawian, or we're also thinking of trying to translate it into Arabic as well. So it's just an idea, but hopefully it would be cool if we did that.
Lovely. And presumably using a local narrator gets around some of the kind of colloquial difficulties and understanding regional UK accents. So yeah, it's able to use somebody in country. It helps.
Definitely, that was Peter's idea. I think at start I thought, like, because it probably, you know, we had used a temporary recording just with Peter, but and I was like, that's actually perfect, like, you know, we could probably just use that if you like. But I think it's a really good idea then now with the finished animations that it is in a local accent.
Lovely.
So I can screen share and show the video now if you like.
I think,
Peter,
sorry, I'm really sorry. I don't think we're going to have time, so we've only got 10 minutes to go.
No problem at all. Sorry about that.
That's all right. Sorry, Peter, but I think we'll send them out and people can watch them.
Yeah.
If we send out all of them, you've got 7 now, haven't you? So people can view them at their leisure. And I've seen them and they are amazing.
Emma, I haven't sent this particular slide to you on email last night. No, I didn't send it. I'm going to send it now to you if that can be shared. Then
yeah, fantastic.
Or whatever. Can I email that to you now?
Yes, that would be brilliant.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks again for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you both. I'm just going to move on to some. Peter, could you stop sharing and then I can.
A sec.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to the presentation. Where are we? I'm just going to go through some Oh, sorry. A couple of tools and tips. Obviously, we've talked about this through, you know, all the speakers have discussed this, and it's a, you know, it's new to me, so I'm no expert in this. It's a huge field, and there's lots of different platforms and things that you can use. But the simplest, you know, you can create a distance learning e-learning package just using Word and PowerPoint and share it on a simple platform such as a website, Google Classroom. We've talked about, Roisin talked about the Powtoon and other ones. And again, take a video and upload it to Vimeo or YouTube and then share those links. In terms of just sort of broader things to look at, there's a link here to Technology for Effective Partnership Collaboration. I'll send this out. It's a THET resource. It's a much sort of broader synthesis of like informatics, but it's quite a useful background resource. And also discussion forums such as Reddit. So there's Reddit's a forum where you can post questions, and it's got loads of experts. And I've seen a couple of questions, people asking along the lines, you know, I want to produce something for a low resource setting. What's the best platform and so on to use? Fidelia, can I just ask you to briefly talk about disability and inclusion in how you design your resource? You there, Fidelia? Yeah, could you just...
I'm here.
Yeah.
Yes, just for disability inclusion, basically, is people to be aware of the font sizes when they are presenting a PowerPoint presentation, for example, to make sure that the font sizes are at least Arial 14, which is the standard for people to view font sizes properly, but also to make sure that the audios are created in such a way people are able to hear properly. And with, I think when you're actually talking and making podcasts, is to make sure that the language is very clear as well. And I think some people have mentioned the issue of accents as well. So just bear that in mind as well, that it could be challenging for some people to hear some of the accents and the difference of different accents altogether. I think those are the key things. We are trying to put together a package potentially of maybe some of the platforms, software that you can use and which are disability friendly. So soon enough, I think we'll be able to share with everyone.
That's great. Thank you. Just, you know, we've talked through the kind of simplest way, but some of this has been come up in the questions. What are the different kind of systems that you can use? So there's e-learning authoring software, and this is really to create and help set out your content. And there's lots of different ones, Erti, Help Explain, Nearpod, Decebo. I'm going to send out, as I said, a resource list after this, and there's a review article which is quite useful for talking about some of them. And then there's learning management systems. So this is really for the administration and delivery of your learning. So Moodle is one, Blackboard, LearnDash, Easy LMS, they're different ways of doing that. I just wanted to talk briefly, there's a Welsh government funded hosted Moodle site, which Learning at Wales, who I can send out some information about it, but they are offering to make that platform accessible to our groups to use if they want to use a Moodle site, and they have IT support because you need an IT specialist really to run a Moodle. And then there's tools for sharing and collaboration. So we talked about Slack, that's for sharing messages and hosting discussions. And then Microsoft Teams and so on. Teamwork is another one. In terms of the variables, I mean, some of them are open source and free. Some of them have a free version, and then, you know, you're talking about the pro version of the Powtoon. And often free isn't exactly free because you don't get much, so you kind of need to pay the subscription anyway. So that's another factor, obviously, and it depends whether you're grant funded or doing it at low cost. And then obviously some are better for graphics or animation, others are better for sort of linear explanation. Some allow more interaction and collaboration, and some have a translation service or they're already available in other languages. So there are quite a lot of considerations. and then the tools for dissemination. So we talked about WhatsApp, Facebook groups, and then, yeah, WhatsApp being a major one at the moment, obviously for COVID-19. And then for webinars and chat, Zoom, Google Hangouts, there's lots of other ones as well. I just wanted to, on the WhatsApp groups, the WHO WhatsApp COVID-19 is quite a useful thing to direct groups to, because it's got a fact checker. It's not in every language, but they are producing more and more languages. And so people can type in or request information, and it's it'll come back with a response to that question. And then Hub Cymru Africa, we've set up some WhatsApp groups to try and share information amongst sort of regionally based. There's also online courses already to use, so there's quite a few of those. Bangor University, I just wanted to mention, they've got an infection control MOOC, which is opening again this Monday for registration. And I'll send out details about that. And then there's lots of online things like Humentum, Kaya Connect, Horizon Medical Education Tools for Development, who are doing online learning that might be of relevance to the groups you're working with, depending on the topic. So we're really short of time, but I just want to hand back to the group if there's any questions. Has anyone got any further or want to share experience or learning from their projects? In terms of follow-up, obviously I'll send out what's on the slides and the presentations that we've had, but I think because it is such a complex area, I was going to schedule, we talked about having a Zoom call, maybe less formal than a webinar, but for people just to dial in and talk about their learning and their projects and share experience. And I'll also give you the links to those other forums. So I just want to say, yeah, there's the evaluation forms. If you could fill those in, that would be great. And a big thank you to all our speakers for giving up their time. Really, really appreciated. And to all of you for joining today. So thank you very much. And see you next time.
Great. Thanks, Emma. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thanks very much.
The next one, I wonder whether we want to say really quickly for anybody.
Yeah, sorry, in 2 weeks, Friday the 5th of June, we're having another webinar on COVID-19. So it'll be for groups we'll have group discussion, more like the format of the last one that we did.
Thanks, Emma.
Okay.
Emma, Peter Harrington here, I've shared those with the chat box, those resources, so apologies, just if anyone wants to log into them, they're there, okay?
That's brilliant. Thank you so much.
You'll see them there. They're sent to Beth and to Emma. So. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I will share that. I'll put that in the email. Brilliant. Thank you very much, Peter. I really appreciated it. Your time.
No bother. No bother.
It's busy.
Just a big appeal to everyone to just disseminate, please, if you don't mind. We hate these to lie dormant in a box in Malawi or in smartphones in our project. The whole point of this is to disseminate. So please have a look at them, and if you're happy, please spread them widely. Thank you.
Will do. Oh.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for sharing. We appreciate it.